How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Brooke. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Are you ready? Should we talk a little bit about my great uncle, Jimmy Van Heusen?
I would love to talk about your great uncle Jimmy Van Heusen. Yes.
Well, I've just got a couple questions. In your case, when did you first discover the music of Jimmy?
Well, I was listening to the music of Jimmy since I was a little kid, but truth be told, I didn't know that Jimmy Van Heusen wrote those great songs I was listening to as a kid with my grandfather until I was in my 20s. It took me until I got to New York City. I came to New York City to pursue my dreams of singing. And when I started to really like do a deep dive into all those standards and put together shows in New York City, I came to learn that Jimmy Van Heusen wrote all these timeless songs that I grew up listening to. I certainly knew who Frank Sinatra was as a kid, but I didn't know who wrote the songs. So I think I was in my mid 20s when I discovered Jimmy Van Heusen wrote all these songs that I had loved my whole life.
What a great start. So, what inspired you to do a tribute concert to the music from Jimmy's catalog, and how long did it take for you to put that together? I guess really, the
So,
more importantly, walk us through the process from start to finish.
absolutely. Well, I had a wonderful mentor named Karen Oberlin, a jazz and cabaret singer here in New York City, and her husband David is a wonderful author. He's written several books about different composers, and you know, um, he was the one that first planted the idea in my head. This was back in like 2010. And I thought, what a great idea. He said, "You're both from Syracuse, New York. You're both Syracuse natives." So I started reading everything I could about Jimmy. I talked to another amazing music critic and writer, Will Friedwald, who I went out to lunch with him to pick his brain about Jimmy. And I was so excited that he had the time of day to do that with me. I was this fresh young person on the cabaret scene in New York City, and I was just blown away by not only the catalog of songs, but the amazing stories, behind the songs and Jimmy's life
Right.
story. So I think it took me, it was one of my first real shows that I put out there in the city. So it was very important to me. I called the show Look to Your Heart, the songs of Jimmy Van Heusen. And I first did it in 2011. It took me, I think, 6 to 8 months to put it together because I really wanted it to be good. I looked at it as my New York debut, and there were so many songs I had to whittle down. It was hard to choose, but more than that, the stories, how he got his name and his youth in Syracuse were just so fantastic. So that's really how it came to be. And I just felt that connection as a Syracuse gal to Jimmy.
And I'm from Syracuse as well. I mean,
I
what a
know. And
crazy
look at
world.
all these
So out of
through.
all these,
Yeah, go ahead.
so out of all of Jimmy's composed songs, what would be your favorite Jimmy Van Heusen composed song?
Again, it is so hard to choose, but I think one of my favorites is Sunday, Monday, or Always. I find it
Right,
to be
great song.
such a great song and such an innocent song, but I feel like so relatable. The lyrics, like, when you get to know someone that you're really falling for and you're hoping that they feel the
Oh,
same, that vulnerability. And I think it has a
right.
sweetness to it. It has like an emotional depth to it, and it's such a gorgeous ballad. That's one of my favorites, but it's so hard to choose.
Well, and that was all the questions I have. Do you have anything else to add to all this? Your experience through the years of performing Jimmy's songs, or
Well,
Your thoughts on what you want to do going forward?
yes, I would love to add a few things. I think the coolest thing about diving into this music, and my grandfather introduced me to this music as a kid. He was such a huge influence on me as a kid in Syracuse. And he introduced me to Sinatra and Bing Crosby. So these songs were kind of in my wheelhouse. And I always gravitated towards these older songs, even as a young person, which delighted my grandfather to no end. But I think the greatest thing
Right.
about doing this Jimmy Van Heusen material is all the people I've met, like getting to connect with you, Brooke, an actual,
Thank you.
a relative, a grand nephew of the man himself, and getting the inside scoop about this genius guy who I think is so fascinating because as you and I have chatted about, everybody knows who Frank Sinatra is, but not enough people know who Jimmy Van Heusen is. And that was just, I think, part of his mystery and his charm. Um, from everything I've learned from you and reading about him, he didn't really, he was very cool and confident in his talent. He didn't really need to be the star or he didn't have to
Right.
have his name in lights. So people don't realize that he was the genius behind, Frank Sinatra's biggest hits. And I think just getting to meet this community of Jimmy Van Heusen lovers has been so rewarding. And then getting to go home to Syracuse and perform these songs for the people of Syracuse
Right.
is really special. To go back to the place where he grew up as a boy and all those fun tales from when he was a kid and how naughty he was. And I don't know. I love to be a small part of his legacy.
Well, you have been a great part of making this all happen, and we appreciate your time for taking time out of your busy day to do this interview.
Well, thank you, Brooke. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.